Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new video. My name is Sean Mora and in this video I'll be talking about the book Infinite Game by Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. It's an absolutely wonderful book, and this book is an application of ideas from James P. Carson's similarly titled book Finite and Infinite Games. This book is a leadership book based on business and highly recommend this for any aspiring entrepreneurs or leaders. It basically covers the idea of long-term management and ethical business. But before that, just know that this is my first actual video, so there's bound to be some flaws here and there. You can always let me know in the comment section. And without further delay, let's start with the actual video. So, what is an infinite game? You read the title of the video and wondered, is it something like Tetris or Flappy Bird? Well, surprisingly, yes. But it's viewed in a different perspective. To begin understanding what I mean by an infinite game, we must remove the in infinite. God, that sounded weird. So it becomes finite game. A finite game is a game that has an end. For example, football. There are set rules and a set time limit and an objective in the game to score goals. Oh, God. As I was saying, in a finite game, there is always a beginning, a middle, and an end. Sometimes it may not be that clear though. Infinite games, on the other hand, don't end, hence the name. One of the many examples of infinite games is business. It doesn't end. And unlike finite games, there is no winning, there is no losing. Like, you just can't win in business, just how it works. The aim of an infinite game is to keep playing. That's literally all there is. And this book teaches us how to operate in such a game. As humans, we have limited lives, and it's hard to think in such a way since we live a limited amount of years in this world as of currently. When you play a finite game, you think differently. You don't think in the long term. This type of mindset makes sense in finite games, but not much in infinite games. A leader should know which game they're in order to play well. A leader shouldn't be in a finite mindset in games such as business, as it is infinite, obviously. The mistake is like putting the wrong shape in a shape sorter. Just not how it works. So let's go about how to do this practically. In a business, the value of an organization should be measured by the desire others have to help the organization succeed, even after they are long gone. Not some stock market value or metric, although they are important, but basically a business should continue to inspire their customers, employers, and shareholders to contribute their effort and their capital to help their business to continue running. And the infinite mindset can help in such an ordeal. Let's discuss how. The infinite perspective frees us from fixating on what other companies are doing, which allows us to focus on a larger vision instead of reacting to how new technology will challenge our business model. Those with infinite mindsets are better able to foresee the applications of new technology, and the result of such a thing is inspiration, innovation, cooperation, and brand loyalty. One of the greatest examples of this is Apple. Steve Jobs was one visionary guy and very infinite at that. Steve Jobs envisioned a future where people could see tools that amplify their abilities. The personal computer was the prime example of that. Apple created the first computer to achieve significant success in the market. And today we have this. Fits right into my hand and is an absolute productivity monster. Best thing ever. Now let's get back to talking about the infinite game. To lead with an infinite mindset, there are three factors we gotta consider. Firstly, we don't get to choose whether a particular game is finite or infinite. You can't just rewrite the rules. And secondly, we do get to choose whether or not we want to join the game. And third, should we choose to join the game, we can choose whether we want to play by an infinite mindset or a finite one. And it's pretty obvious that to effectively lead in a game, we must know what type of game we're playing. Now, for any leader to attain an infinite mindset, they require 5 things: advance a just cause, building trusting teams, study your worthy rivals, prepare for existential flexibility, and demonstrate the courage to lead. Just cause. Any leader who wishes to lead in an infinite game must have a crystal clear just cause. A just cause is a specific vision of the future that does not yet exist, not to be confused with a game just cause. A future so appealing that people are willing to make sacrifices in order to advance that vision. A just cause must be for something affirmative and optimistic, inclusive, open to all those who would like to contribute, service-oriented for the primary benefit of others, resilient, able to endure political, technological, and cultural change, and idealistic, big, bold, and ultimately unachievable. for something affirmative and optimistic. A just cause should be for doing something, not being against. The just cause should bring people to an infinite mindset, not a finite one. Fighting against something brings you to a finite mindset where you can win. Let me give you an example of the positivity versus negativity or optimism versus pessimism ideology. It's not completely related, but you'll get my point. When you hear the words don't think of an elephant, you immediately think of an elephant. It's a very common example Simon uses to illustrate how the human brain just can't comprehend pessimism. Inclusive, open to all those who like to contribute. A just cause should serve as an invitation to join others in advancing a cause bigger than ourselves. An organization should be willing to accept people who are passionate about a just cause. It's best practice to do this because so that as many people can join as possible. In infinite-minded companies, there should be always more missionaries than mercenaries. Missionaries are people who care about the company's vision and want to contribute to it, whereas a mercenary just does it for the money. Service oriented. A just cause must involve two parties, the contributors and the beneficiaries. Contributors are those who give something to advance the just cause. For example, ideas, hard work, and money. The primary benefit of every just cause should always go to the people rather than the contributors themselves. This is not to be confused with a charity, although not all the benefits of the contributors must go to our receivers. Resilient, able to endure political, technological, and cultural change. In the infinite game of business, a just cause must be greater than the products we make and the services we offer. Our products and services are some of the things that we use to advance our just cause. They are just not the cause themselves. A just cause should not be rendered obsolete by any technological, political, or cultural change. It should be a cause which is there for an infinite time frame. Idealistic, big, bold, and ultimately unachievable. Now, it may seem a bit weird to have your goal unachievable, but I'll get to that. Our just cause should be something that is ultimately impossible to achieve. The main point of an infinite just cause is to keep feeling that we have further to go. A good example is what Elon is doing with SpaceX. He wants to get humans to Mars by 2030, which seems like a very unrealistic goal, and his company is doing things that many companies and government organizations have never been able to do. He's really changed the industry. I really recommend reading his biography if you're interested in learning more. Now, let's shift back gear a bit towards the business side of things. The responsibility of business revised. Today, the time it takes before a company gets forced out of the game is getting shorter and shorter. The average life expectancy of a company was just over 60 years in the 1950s, but today it is less than 20. According to a 2017 study by Credit Suisse, disruptive technologies are what caused this decrease in life expectancy, but the author begs to differ. He states that disruptive technologies are nothing new. We have the credit card, the microwave, the television, hard disk, optic fiber, plastic, which are all introduced in the 1950s. And that a disruption is more of a symptom of a more gradual root cause. According to him, it's the result of short-sightedness. Short-sightedness occurs when a leader fails to envision the future of their business as the world changes around them. And short-sightedness is an inherent condition in leaders with a finite mindset. Now, Milton Friedman, one of the greatest theorists of capitalism, laid out the foundation of shareholder primacy, which is the root of all finite businesses. Now, Milton argued that the main focus of a business is to make as much as money as possible while it's still being legal. So basically, the idea is that to do whatever it takes to achieve maximum profit. However, the author argues that Milton held a very one-dimensional approach to the problem. Now, when we look at the history of businesses, say a restaurant, everybody used to conform to their selfish desires. For example, a chef wanted to offer the best cuts of meat he could, and many of these businesses did not have the outside forces to pressure them into cost cutting, so they did what they wanted to. However, times have changed. The rise of shareholder supremacy led to the rise of investing in businesses, which changed how businesses worked. Now, Friedman's 1970 article is what led directors and executives to be responsible to their owners, i.e., the shareholders. This idea took off in 1980s and 90s, and most businesses now focus on shorter and shorter gains. According to the author, many businesses today do what is called capitalism abuse. Simply, they used capitalism for the wrong reasons. And he argues that companies aren't just for making money, but for advancing technology, or the quality of life, or anything that has potential to ease our pain. Henry Ford once said, "A business that makes nothing but money is a poor kind of business." Capitalism is more than just prosperity, but about progress as well. He argues that due to Milton's ideas, we have the capitalism we have today, not used for what it was intended for. Company CEOs' salaries have increased up to 950% since the last 50 years, while the worker's salary has only increased by 11 times. Now, according to Dr. Stout's shareholder value myth, if 80% of a CEO's pay is based on what their price is going to be on the next year, they'll obviously make sure it does go up, even if it harms their employees. For them, it becomes a game of short term again and again and again, which is a very finite view. Some even argue that the long term is just a bunch of short terms. And the author argues that if we promote such business practices and leadership, people will be best qualified to play by these finite rules that Friedman espoused. And this creates a sort of pressure to play with the infinite mindset. Entrepreneurs and businesses alike are seemingly forced to demonstrate high speed growth and to achieve that goal. Or when growth slows, they turn to venture capitalists. And it may sound normal, but the fundamental flaw is that many venture capitalists don't care about the infinite value, but more of want the final, the finite value basically. For example, for them, it's just a short term investment rather than a long term. And there's no such rule that curtails that you have to have fast growth for building a company to last. An infinite minded leader is the one who views their growth as an adjustable variable. Sometimes it is important to strategically slow the rate of growth to ensure the security of the long term. Finite leaders, on the other hand, sacrifice their long term for short term benefit. Now, another problem with today's capitalism is that it is imbalanced. Not everyone is treated fairly. And as we know, when there's an imbalance, there's sometimes corrections. Sometimes they can be really violent, like revolutions. I won't go too much into that for now. Now, let's define what a business's responsibility really is. Firstly, to advance a purpose, offer people a sense of belonging and a feeling that their lives and their work have value beyond the physical work. And secondly, to protect people, operate our companies in a way that protects the people who work for us and the people who buy from us and the environments in which we are to live and work. Generating profit. Money is the fuel for a business to remain viable so that it may continue to advance the first two priorities. To sum it all up, the responsibility of a business is to use its will and resources to advance a cause greater than itself. Protect the people and places in it which it operates and generate more resources so that it can continue all these things for as long as possible. An organization can do whatever it likes to build its business as long as it's responsible for the consequences of its actions. Will and resources. Will and resources are the currencies in an infinite game. It's not about getting the most out of people, but trying to help them grow stronger. They aren't objects. The question may yield output in the short term, but in the long term, it leads to scandals and many other things that a business shouldn't want. We should instead focus on how to create an environment where people can work at their natural best. Leaders should work to create environments where we train people how to prioritize people over results. When we talk about will and resources, we are referring to a quantity that is tangible and easily measurable, while willpower is intangible and harder to measure. You can't use a scale to measure willpower, it's pretty obvious. All leaders obviously know that resources are essential, whether or not they are operating with a finite or infinite mindset. So then, why can't we just prioritize will and resources equally? Well, the thing is, they can never be equally prioritized because there will obviously be a circumstance where a leader must choose what they're willing to choose. Every leader has a bias per se, since we're all humans. When we look at most leaders, We see this as their list of priorities: growth, our customers, our people. Now, you may see the problem here after discussing this for so long. They are mostly finite minded and show a bias for the score, aka the growth. The situation for finite minded leaders is quite possible. They try their best to make sure that people are before profit as much as possible. Now, there's another at play here. Why invest in people who aren't going to stick around? The author argues that this is a very one dimensional approach and finite approach to how businesses function. So, when we talk about cost for increasing willpower, once we do some tricky calculations, it turns out to be zero. Apple, one of the most well known infinite minded companies, gives people the same benefits as full time employees who work at corporate, including full medical and dental coverage and $2,500 in educational reimbursement should they wish to take classes outside work. This shows their care towards their employees. Of course, these are real costs, but we can always provide emotional support to our employees by a myriad of ways. And these additional costs are offset by the money that the company loses from people leaving their company. He argues that if the actual costs are at a net neutral, then the difference in how we treat people is a matter of mindset per se. Because of this, companies like Costco and Apple enjoy average retention rates around 90%. Trusting teams. One of the most important things in a team is safety, not only physically but psychologically. A person should be free to make mistakes. We should be safe to admit when we make a mistake and be honest to ourselves and ask for help. Many a times when we are faced with a team we can't trust, we are often forced to lie, hide, and fake to compensate. We can't even ask for help without getting humiliated. This leads to problems in any team, for the matter. And our ability to trust isn't based on what industry or business we are in, it's purely universal. And you may think, isn't performance good as well? Well, it is definitely important. And you have to understand that trust should come before competence because performance can lead to a very competitive and toxic workplace where only the best can survive. Sort of like survival of the fittest, which leads to companies not having a very infinite mindset, as it doesn't allow people who are very passionate to work well. And these high performance of low trust rarely, when confronted, rarely agree or ever want to listen. They don't listen to other people and can't trust anyone apart from themselves. The real question a leader should ask if a person is struggling with trust or performance, or even both, is are they coachable? Are they changeable? And in any organization, it is the leader's responsibility to make sure you have a safe environment to begin with. Then only trust can grow. A leader can't force anyone into it. It takes time. The most anxiety inducing thing is to be alone. And if you're in a team and feel alone, that is a very bad thing. And anxiety is what leads to fear, a very powerful motivator. It can lead to the best finite options at the risk of doing infinite damage. The results of this infinite mindedness is a culture of solving problems rather than applying a band aid on them. Now let's talk about a new concept, ethical failing. So when we talk about the ethics of business, let's focus on this new term, ethical failing. A condition where people act unethically in order to advance their own interests. Often, finite leaders are susceptible to ethical failing because they aim for focus and profit. Sorry. It's as if they think the means don't matter, just the ends. And a thing like an infinite-minded business, that is untrue. Ethical failing isn't something that happens suddenly either. It's like an infection that spreads over time. Ethical failing leads to many scandals and many problems, which you don't want to deal with. And soon this unethical behavior becomes the new normal. Humans often deceive themselves. We can always rationalize our behavior and we can deceive ourselves into thinking unethically, which is the prime factor to ethical failing. A good example of this is procrastination. Oh, I have to do work tomorrow. Nah, I'll just do it later. There are many types of these euphemisms. For example, removing yourself from the loop of causation itself and blaming the system for ethical failing. And the problem is, we normalize this behavior of ethical fading. As long as it isn't legal, it's perfectly fine, which is obviously not how it should be. And then there's the classic, oh, it's because of the system excuse. Here is the problem where structure replaces leadership. When a problem arises, performance lags and mistakes are made or any unethical decisions are uncovered. Lazy leadership chooses to put efforts into building processes to fix the problems rather than helping the people themselves. It's like trying to break a tree while the axe is broken. But instead of trying to fix the axe, you just use other techniques of cutting the tree. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Even if the actions are of good intention, it just won't work. And sometimes ethical fading is caused by absurd processes. When there is too much pressure, it leads to doing things that are unethical. And to fix such a problem, training, paperwork, and certifications won't do. We're people after all. The best antidote against such a mindset is an infinite mindset. Leaders who give their people a just cause to advance and give them an opportunity to work with a trusting team will build a culture where people can work towards short term goals while also maintaining morality, ethics, and wider impact of the decisions to meet those goals. And this is another reason why just causes are important. Leaders of companies should prioritize their company's just causes before short term financial profit so that they can act ethically. Finite minded leaders would fear doing any of this. Like being kind, what? That's illegal. But seriously, they think too much about profits, and that's really bad in an infinite minded point of view. An infinite minded leader would just see money as a fuel to continue their just cause. These ethical decisions are not based on what's best for the short term, but what's best on the right thing to do. Whereas short term decisions go at the expense of a company and makes it weaker, worthy rival. A worthy rival is another player in the game who is worthy of comparison. They may or may not be outside our industry, and they may or may not be playing with a finite or infinite mindset. But what matters truly is if we are playing with an infinite mindset. There are people who may do certain things better than us, or equal to us. We don't need to admire them or even like them. But we have to try to simply acknowledge that they have strength and abilities from which we can learn or two. And note, we shouldn't just choose anyone for a worthy rival. We have to be careful with who we want to choose. We do not want to keep choosing other players just to outflank them and feel superior. That has little to no value. And we choose these worthy rivals because they reveal our weaknesses and push us to constantly improve. And there's also a difference between competition and worthy rivals. You're always at the attitude of winning in a competition, whereas a worthy rival inspires us to take on an attitude of improvement. It basically gives a reality check in a way. Normal competition puts an excessive level of focus on beating our competition, which would only get us exhausted over time and can stifle innovation, whereas a worthy rival can constantly improve us. And the great thing about worthy rivals are that it is an ethical game. It removes the pressure of the win at any cost struggle, and so we do not need to act unethically. In the end, our values are what's more important in the score, which actually motivates honesty. Welcoming a worthy rival is also important. We shouldn't panic when we see competition, but instead we should be inspired by it, viewing companies who have potential to be better than ours as worthy rivals. A small example of this is Apple versus IBM. Apple literally ran a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal with the headline, Welcome IBM. Seriously. This is an example of a company viewing their new player as a rival than a competitor. But we may never be able to find a worthy rival if we are blind, as in cause blind. Cause blindness is a condition in which we become so wrapped up into our just cause that we view other just causes as wrong, and we fail to recognize the strengths or weaknesses of them. It gives rise to arrogance and blunts humility. This in turn makes us less innovative and reduces the flexibility required for the long term. But just remember, losing your worthy rival doesn't mean winning the game. As stated, in infinite games, we cannot win. We have to keep going. Existential flexibility. Existential flexibility is the capacity to initiate a pivot or a major change to a business model or strategic course in order to more effectively advance a just cause. When an infinite minded leader sees a future opportunity and has a clear sense of the just cause, they will take a pause to advance it and flex or pivot. Like, for example, Apple bringing the iPhone after the iPod. Major change. An existential flex is not to be viewed as a defense mechanism either. It's not something we do to survive, but instead something we do just to find a better way to advance our just cause. You can sort of think of it like a startup. In a startup, the members of a company are fueled by an enthusiasm for its vision rather than the resources the company has. An existential flex recreates that vision in an already successful company. It's also not the same enthusiasm as demonstrated by a startup. It's called an existential flex because the leader is risking the apparent certainty and the path the company is going. But as we know, the biggest risk is that of being on the same path in an infinite game. And these existential flexes are what lead to world building abilities. To the outsider, it looks as if they're predicting the future, but no, they're making it. The iPhone, once again, is an amazing example of it. And the idea is that if we don't take the risk and end up destroying our company, like somebody else will. The courage to lead. The courage to lead is a willingness to take risks for the good of an unknown future. These decisions may have short term costs like less stock at market value or a loss in sales, but it leads to a much greater long term benefit. And this is not solely about the actions we take. Even leaders who operate with a finite mindset can take risks. Courage is to operate with an infinite mindset and change how we think of the world. It is to disobey Milton Friedman's ideas. And there are a few things that we need to find the courage to make such risks. Firstly, we can wait for a life altering experience that shakes us to the core and challenges the way we see the world. Or we can find a just cause that inspires us and, our others around us so that we can make teams which share a common just cause and with people who we trust and who trust us. The first method is obviously a gamble, so I don't recommend waiting for it. The second, however, provides a bit more certainty and control. All that is required is faith, discipline, and the will to practice. And these are the things that provide us purpose, whether it be starting your first just cause or helping another, which leads to the creation of the courage to lead. So let's conclude all of this. An infinite game is a game that lasts for an infinite amount of time. A just cause is a vision of the future that does not exist, which gives people the will to contribute. In an infinite minded company, the people's will is of greater importance than the resources. Trusting teams lead to performing people at their best. Trusting teams lead to people performing at their natural best. Existential flexibility is of huge importance to continuous innovation in already successful companies. The courage to lead is the courage to take long term decisions for the advancement of the just cause, just to sacrifice a bit of short term. I hope you all enjoyed this long video. A like and subscribe to the channel would be marvelous. You can also follow our socials down below. We'll have a documentary next week. It'll be a bit less complicated. Until then, ciao.